Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I am Jon Wilner. He is John Canzano. It is the penultimate week of the regular season. I like that word. Right?
Yes.
We got a bunch of games to talk about that just happened. Looking forward to this coming Saturday, and a bunch of off-the-field news, even a little bit of weather-related discussion here, which you can fill us in on. How was have you dried off yet?
No, I have not dried off. I was at San Diego State, Boise State on Saturday at Snapdragon Stadium. Kind of cool to be there for what is a Mountain West game, but will be a New World Pac-12 game. There's a lot of talk about that at the stadium, but people all day in San Diego were freaking out about the weather. They were carrying their umbrellas around. Wilner, the Pacific Northwesterners would have laughed at him, but sure. It started raining in about end of the first quarter of the game, and was just a steady drizzle. And the fans in San Diego, which already look, I think they're already having some challenges with trying to get people to that stadium. That even though the football is good, like the product's good, they're having some challenges. And then the weather on top of that, I think, kept a bunch of people away. And then certainly I could see the people fleeing out of their seats to try to run for cover as it was starting to drizzle. But rainy. Wet, felt like a November football game.
Out of the 1950s.
Yes.
Right? There was about at the end of the three quarters, were there 24, 30 yards passing, something like that? It was incredible. It was like there was a single wing. I was looking for the single wing.
No passing. To San Diego State's credit, I mean, they played a very physical game. Their defense is just very physical, and Boise couldn't match it. I think Sean Lewis knew that, and I think that was sort of the strategy. Let's not make a mistake. Let's not put the ball in the air. I think if you keep the ball on the ground, they're going to win that game. And they do, 17-7. They're in the driver's seat. There was some talk at the game, Wilner. How about this? Because San Diego State now has the inside track to host the Mountain West Conference Championship if they win out.
Yes.
What is the New World Pac-12 going to do with that championship game? What's your bet on that right now?
I would bet that they go to they use the same thing the Mountain West is doing now, home field of the highest seed. It just makes a lot more sense to me in a lot of ways than going to a neutral site in Vegas. I know you're a fan of going to Vegas, right?
I'm a fan for me going to Vegas. I don't necessarily
need
the game going to Vegas, but I'm with you because, I got that impression too that, if you get let's say you get Texas State, Utah State, or Texas State, Fresno State and you're in Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. Nothing against those fan bases, but you're not going to draw 45,000, 50,000 fans to see that Pac-12 championship game. You're not on that stratosphere right now. So I do think it makes sense to give that home team an advantage and also set your conference up for a potential championship game that is a catalyst for them in the college football playoff. You get that highest ranked team. It's, if you're in a battle with another group of 5 conference for that final playoff spot, then you've got your best team playing at home that weekend.
Yep. And everything they're doing is geared toward positioning their champion to get in the playoff. That is almost the sole singular driving focus for them in terms of, the operations, the scheduling, the championship game. Everything is about the playoff, as it should be. What else did you see from the weekend that left an impression on you?
Well, I sat with J.D. Wicker, the athletic director at San Diego State, and it's my latest installment of the tour I'm on of the new Pac-12. And just, he talked, the thing that hit me is he talked like it was a painful thing when the Pac-12 imploded. Oregon State and Washington State fans suffered. But I think after that, San Diego State had its hopes so high. And Wicker told me it was in Canton, Ohio. There was, for a Hall of Fame event, he was being told by George Kliavkoff that the first agenda item on that Friday morning in August was, voting on the grant of rights, getting everybody to sign it. The second item was voting for San Diego State to come into the Pac-12. And, he was being told at about 10 o'clock Eastern time that was happening. And then it was the gut punch of gut punches, not just for Oregon State and Washington State, but for San Diego State as well. And I don't, Boise State, Texas State, they all look opportunistic, right, in this. But San Diego State thought it was in the Pac-12 and thought it was coming in to replace, part of the LA divot that was left, and it didn't happen. But he's got a stadium in Snapdragon Stadium that there's work to do there. They only have about 7,500 season ticket holders that are signed up. He's got a football coach who is looking really good in Sean Lewis. They've got to figure out how do they keep him if other schools come calling. Lewis, if he leaves, make it so he leaves only for a really good no-brainer Power 4 job, not for a lateral move. And so I think San Diego State doing some strategy right now.
Yeah, Lewis was a great hire all along. He had done so well at Kent State, then got that experience at Colorado calling plays for Dion, and then that didn't maybe work out as well as he had hoped, but it certainly led to the San Diego State job. And I know that he's been mentioned as a candidate for the UCLA gig, and I'll believe it when I see it that the Bruins hire a coach from San Diego State. They just to me that's just that they look at that as beneath them and always have anything that has to do with the CSU schools.
Yeah. And you know what hit me too is, I spent a lot of time around Boise State, and they were like, they were my first stop on this Pac-12 tour. And so Boise State's in the stadium, and there's a real culture of Boise State football that walks into the building with Boise State. But what struck me in being at Snapdragon was I could feel the San Diego State culture, and I haven't always been able to feel that. And so, it's very early in Lewis's tenure, but the families and the parents and the people standing on the sideline, the people who are lined up in they have this tunnel at Snapdragon where like the club level, suite level ticket holders can stand and kind of greet the team as they're walking from the locker room onto the field. It was 12 or 15 fans deep all the way along that line. There's a real culture change there that has happened. Now, can they expand that to, they were a 12-minute drive from the campus to get to Snapdragon. Can they get more students to the games? Can they draw in a San Diego crowd that, has largely given the stiff arm to San Diego State? Even when Marshall Faulk was there and San Diego State was really good in the 90s, they weren't drawing like the Padres, right? They weren't drawing like the Chargers. They were always seen as that ancillary sports offering. But I think Lewis is tapping into something. He's got to keep winning. But, if they lose him, it derails that. So I think, you've got to really try to do everything you can if you are J.D. Wicker to keep Sean Lewis there.
No doubt about it. I think their basketball program has some of that culture you can feel, right? It's the tentpole programs of the new Pac-12, San Diego State basketball, Gonzaga basketball, Boise State football. There's a lot there. Should we, I had kind of figured we could talk about some other games, but maybe we should just dive right into some of the news from last week. And it was a very newsy week, but should we hit on the Pac-12's completion of the media deal?
Yeah, sure. Why not? USA Network coming in, picking up a big chunk of football and some basketball. This gives you the picture now. CBS Sports Network, USA Network, and the CW. Clearly, Wilner, this is a distribution play by the Pac-12. They want to be everywhere, anywhere, visible. You're going to be able to see their games. Glaring to me that there's no ESPN or Fox presence in this deal so far, and looks like it won't be at all. But what did you make of it?
Well, I think that they, actually wrote something about this the other day. If you're grading it, you probably need to give it a B or a C. And I'm not sure that we know quite enough for a final grade. I don't think it's an A level deal, partly because there's no Fox or ESPN, but also, I think the finances are on the low end of the range that they were looking for. But it's certainly not down at the D level because they have got very good exposure. I mean, every football game being on linear television is a big deal. And that's part of the reason I think that those schools decided to jump from the Mountain West into the Pac-12 rather than having Oregon State and Washington State enter the Mountain West is they wanted exposure and better competition. And I think they got 2 of their 3 goals, right? It was money, it was exposure, and it was competition. And they got 2 of the 3 for sure.
Yeah, and I think you also have to compare it to not just to what those Mountain West schools were earning in the Mountain West, but what would they have received in this next deal? So I'm curious to see what the Mountain West ends up with as part of their TV package. But, there's also the Pac-12 Enterprises portion of this.
Yes.
I think we both kind of speculated that the Pac-12, when they do release some dollar figures on this deal, that Pac-12 Enterprises revenue may be baked in there. Will they also include the expenses of producing those games, or will that be kept separate? As we know, look what the Big Ten did when they released their deal. It was 7 years, $7 billion. And then we've come to find out, well, they had to give back $65 million to Fox, and NBC's piece wasn't done. And it wasn't quite as lucrative. It wasn't the $82 million per school that everybody thought. It was more in the 60s, right? And so I think, that it wouldn't be the first time that a deal had been exaggerated, but I think, that's real dollars. That's real money that Pac-12 Enterprises is adding. So I think, the schools are all going, hey, we have more money than we had before. Oregon State, Washington State don't, but the others do. And they're getting broad distribution. Now, I worried about the non-presence of ESPN in the deal, because I thought, gosh, the glow of that ESPN shoulder programming is real. It's big. Yep. Look at the SEC. You're going to hear about it in the next 2 weeks. Oh, the SEC is great. A 3-loss team should get into the playoffs. They're so good. Oh, they should go do their own thing. They're that good. If you lose that and you're the Pac-12, how much does that hurt? But as I talked with a number of ADs last week about the deal, I kept going, gosh, if you could get ESPN to care about you, it really helps. And one of the ADs shot back and said, if ESPN cared about us, would we be here? And they're basically going, hey, we're going with distribution.
We're going with distribution, which for what is essentially a startup conference certainly makes some sense. And, if they had ESPN, almost every game would be on ESPN Plus, right? I mean, there would be very little linear ESPN, ABC exposure. So, they're getting on broadcast television and cable with CBS, the CW and USA, and CBS is, that's a legitimate. They've got the Big Ten game. If they end up doing double headers off the Big Ten game, that'll provide them with something. And Rick Neuheisel, who joined us last week on the show, he will certainly be talking about the new Pac-12. But the ESPN piece is definitely a hole. I don't know about antitrust lawsuit. I mean, the Pac-12 is going to be going back to market in like 5 years for a new deal. They don't want to be, they need to preserve whatever relationships they've got going forward.
Yeah, but do they have a relationship with ESPN and Fox? I mean, I think there's some lingering bad feelings, and there clearly wasn't an interest from ESPN and Fox last time. But I hear what you're saying. Like, you don't take that shot unless you've really got that shot. And I'm left wondering about Discovery in the original lawsuit, Pac-12 suing the 10 departing members. Did something come out of that caught the Pac-12's eye? We'll find out eventually, but I don't think it's there at that point. It's just right now it's an interesting package that is, linear television and broad distribution. And USA Network gets them into 70 million households.
Yep.
CW, 99.9% of households. CBS, big CBS. And, I do think there are marketing dollars baked into the deal. I have been told that by sources that, there's some marketing dollars that are in there to help promote the product. But let's see if you can do it without, what are they going to buy airtime on ESPN, promote? Like, I don't know. Like, let's see what you can do if you're the Pac-12.
Let's see what you can do. We certainly need answers on, and I don't know how easy they will be to get, the expense portion for Pac-12 Enterprises, but also what is Pac-12 Enterprises going to do in terms of generating revenue from other, as a sub-licensee of other content. We also don't know exactly what Texas State's revenue share is going to be, right? So that makes it a little bit more complicated in figuring out the bottom line number.
Remember, Kelly Damphus, the Texas State president, he did a one-on-one with me, and it came after he did all that half a bowl of soup, full bowl of soup stuff on social media. But he did this one-on-one with me, and where he framed it as very differently. Listen to him here, and then I want you to tell me, what kind of distribution do you think Texas State got? But here's Kelly Damphus, the president at Texas State.
We've never talked about that, even when we're in the Sun Belt, about what our distribution was. And there's all kinds of speculation about how much we get in the Sun Belt, and almost none of it is. I don't think I've seen the right number yet out there, and so we've never talked about that in the past. For us, it was access to championships and postseason championships, access to the college football playoff, being able to get into new markets, having really exciting destinations for our fans to go to, bringing great universities to our campus. Just think, for example, the fact I'm looking right outside my window here, our basketball arena, and having Gonzaga come here, having Oregon State come and play baseball here, and a chance to go play there, and a lot of the other athletics programs, how successful are across the board. We wanted to be part of what we think will be the next best, as Don said, the fifth, top 5 conference in all these sports. And so that was really important to us. But if it didn't make sense economically, we wouldn't have done it. We're not going to go into an operation and make less money than we were before. And so I'm very happy with what we ended up with. And I'm excited about the fact that we'll have more resources now than we've ever had before. And as the commissioner said, they see us as a full member, which is what my ultimate goal was to be a full member of the conference. And I can't wait to be part of it. And I'm excited about the opportunities in front of us.
What's your hunch on that? I've got a ballpark hunch on it.
I've got, it's 5 years. So it's laddering up. It might be, nothing the first year, 25, 50, 75, 100%, something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the educated information that I got told me that Texas State would get larger than their distribution in the Sun Belt in year 1. And then it ramped up, I think, in year 2 to like maybe 50%. And then a 75 ladder up to 100 by the 5th year in the deal. And so I think there'll be a nice gradual takeoff there. And Texas State's happy with that. They're getting more money than they ever would have got before, getting more exposure than they would have got before. And they have a little bit of a sleeping giant feel. It kind of reminds me of Arizona State a little bit and how we viewed ASU for years.
Yeah.
Like you've got the resources, you've got the footprint, but what's going on? Like, why aren't you winning? Like, I think, that's the question for Texas State as they come in. Yep. There's also the fourth piece of the media deal is, what do they do with the Olympic sports, right? And I had originally thought ESPN's direct-to-consumer offering would be the home for the Olympic sports. They'll put it behind a paywall, make some money on it. I'm now leaning towards, Wilner, that the Pac-12 enterprises may produce this itself. They may put it on their own website. They may have an app. They may have their own paywall. They may get into business as an entity themselves, kind of in the same way that the Big Ten Plus stuff is out there.
Right. And the thing to remember is that the technology that Pac-12 Enterprises uses is easily transportable. They don't rely on the giant TV trucks. They have these things. I think they're called air packs or jet packs. It's like a suitcase, and you can set that up at a venue on a campus, and basically that is your, that's your computer programming center for everything that then gets uploaded to San Ramon. It's much cheaper. So that's why it's a little bit tougher to kind of guess on the expense side, because the Pac-12 Enterprises does typically do things a little cheaper than the traditional network with those jetpack technology.
I think it's gonna be interesting to see what happens there. But I kind of floated out ESPN Plus or ESPN's direct-to-consumer thing as the home for the Olympic sports, and I got some pushback from different corners of the Pac-12 saying, "Well, why wouldn't we do that ourselves?" And look, I'm in that business myself, right? Like, I do think that if you've got the content, the consumer will come to you. And I think the Pac-12 knows it's got some Olympic sports content that people are going to want. Now, do they put it for free and get wide distribution with their own app or their own website? Or do they go, hey, we're going to put it behind a paywall anyway? Do we create a paywall and they create some additional revenue by, offering a small subscription fee for that? We'll see. We'll see what happens.
We'll see. Let's stay in the Pac-12 here. The current Pac-12, not the new Pac-12. Some big news out of Pullman last week with McCoy being summarily dismissed by new president Betsy Cantwell. What did you think of that? It kind of came out of nowhere, but it also, you could, the writing was faintly on the wall, I thought, for a while.
Yeah, I think it, look, a move like that blindsides you because of the timing, right? It's less than 18 months into a 5-year deal. Washington State doesn't strike you as the kind of place that wants to pay somebody for 3.5 years to not work. And so, the timing of it is interesting. The personalities involved, as I talked with people in Pullman last week and noted myself, the personalities involved here are dramatically different. I mean,
yes,
you have Elizabeth Cantwell, who is all about business and has one speed. And you've got Ann McCoy, who is folksy and warm and very connective with donors and coaches and staff members. Very different styles, right? Diametrically opposed. Now, I'm told that Cantwell called McCoy, and this goes to the style, on Tuesday night, basically to inform her that she was moving in another direction. And that, this is a phone call for an employee who had been there for that long. So decide for yourself if that's just the shrewd business move, you're making a change, you don't want to wait. Or is that, hey, you should have waited and done that in person. That's a whole nother conversation. But look, I think McCoy's going to be fine. She doesn't have to work for 3.5 years, or it's a potential here. I even thought, could she end up in the Pac-12 headquarters office working for Teresa Gold?
Yeah.
I think they have a good relationship. That would require Elizabeth Cantwell to sign off on that, though, because she technically, Teresa Gold answers to the presidents of the Pac-12. So
yep.
There's a little bit of awkwardness there, but Washington State's got a hole in its budget. And I think Elizabeth Cantwell said, I need a fundraiser, killer, highly motivated, new world AD type. And Ann McCoy is of the old world of ADs that, has the relationships and is very quick to ask you how your kids are and tell you about her kid who's a swimmer. And so a very different approach.
Yeah, well, the best way to kind of patch that hole in their budget with fundraising is to start winning.
Yeah,
they may get bowl eligible here, but look, McCoy's legacy in my mind is going to be judged based on how Jimmy Rogers does the next 2-3 years, and if he gets them, to the top or near the top of the new Pac-12, we're going to look back at McCoy's brief tenure as being a big success, because the football hire is the most important move an AD makes, and it will help. The trickle down effect for NIL resources is enormous. But they, the bar was raised when they brought in Boise on the football side and Gonzaga on the basketball side, right? And for Oregon State and Washington State both, they immediately were not at the top of the heap in those sports as soon as those schools came in. And San Diego State is going to be formidable in both sports as well. So we will see. There's a little bit of uncertainty about both the Beavers and the Cougars right now. Yeah. Slightly different on each campus, but in total, you wonder where they fit in the new Pac-12, where they're going to fit the first couple of years.
Here's one of the realities too, that Oregon State, Washington State will fund up here as new members. Like their expenses in their athletic department will be near the top or at the top of the New World Pac-12. But there's a portion of that funding, Wilner, that is dedicated to the kinds of things that just were natural byproducts from them being in a Power 5 conference a few years ago. They have debt on their existing football stadiums and their facilities that are in line with the Power 4, not Power 5. And so their expenses are much bigger. And, it's interesting is even as I talk with candidates who are interested in the Oregon State football job, one of the things that keeps coming up is, will they have an assistant coaching salary pool and recruiting budget that is in line with Boise State and San Diego State? Or are they just going to say, hey, we're funding at the top of the conference, but oh, wait, the Reser Stadium West Side project is a huge part of that funding and their expenses. Yep. So you're going to really have to drill into the line items to see, are these schools behaving like they want to win, or, does does the debt that Bill Moose ran up, expanding the stadium at Washington State and rebuilding things, does all that debt haunting Washington State right now and Oregon State as well? So, they've got to look at their real line item expenses as they compare with San Diego State, Boise State, and others.
Right. And those line item expenses don't include NIL,
right,
which is going to be huge. And the NIL is tied to the fundraising piece and the on-field success and the energy that your alums and constituents have. But the on-field success is partly rooted in how much money you can plow into your football program. So there is interconnection between all those things, and that debt, like you said, a lot of the power conference schools have that kind of debt. And look at what's going on in the Big Ten, right? They are considering this private capital deal for billions of dollars, partly because a lot of these schools, including Washington, have a lot of debt, facility debt, other, paying off coaches, everything you can think of for running an apartment over the course of time. And they are desperate enough that they're gonna sell off part of the Big Ten's future in order to get an infusion of cash to pay down these debts so that they can direct more money into football operations.
No, I'll go back to my Saturday. Okay. So JD Wicker's the AD at San Diego State, Jeremiah Dickey, AD at Boise State. I saw them both, right? I talked to them both in person. Wicker's day included, he started at 8 a.m. He's going to a bunch of donor events. He's going to the tailgate. He's going to these pregame parties. He's meeting with donors. His day, people think he's just going to a football game. His day was just rapid fire, all of this. And it's all aimed at gift giving, NIL, donor-based stuff. Meanwhile, over at the team hotel for Boise State, Jeremiah Dickey's over there, and I went over there to see him. He was coming from a meeting where he was off at some marina seeing the new boat of a Boise State donor who is writing big checks to Boise State. And he's running around like a chicken with his head cut off, doing stuff too, because he's down in Southern California where there's some Boise State alums who live.
Yep.
And he's going out and he's meeting and shaking hands. And he's just it is a never ending siege of meetings and handshakes and backslaps. And, there's a football game, but they're all aimed at the same thing. It's external fundraising.
It is. And the way you describe their days is that's the day that Washington State's next athletic director is going to have. And so I would imagine Betsy Cantwell is going to be looking for someone who will thrive in that environment with the relentless engagement that is required of an athletic director. Now, does it matter if they the next AD there has ties to Washington State? I think it probably helps, but I don't think it precludes them, right? I mean, look at Pat Chun did a terrific job there, and he had never, worked in the Pacific Northwest. So I think that Cantwell has got to prioritize, energy engagement with the AD hire.
And here's a wild card I'm going to throw out there, because I think we're going to see some turnover with the Pac-12 ADs. Even Scott Barnes at Oregon State, there's been talk about, would he go to an advisory role at Oregon State? Washington State's certainly going to make a hire. I think Baylor would look hard at Jeremiah Dickey, the Boise State AD.
Yep.
If they were I think there could be some movement. I kind of expect that we're going to see, moves that remind us of when Pat Kilkenny took over at Oregon as the athletic director. He was from the business world, and he stepped in and he did that job for $1 a year, became the athletic director at Oregon. I kind of wonder if there's some right sizing that goes on at Washington State, maybe Oregon State, where the next AD isn't an AD at all. This person is a fundraiser who's from the business world, who knows how a new world business operates, and sort of changes the structure inside the athletic department to maybe more closely mirror a corporate structure. And I think you're going to see some of that happening with these hires.
Well, I mean, Stanford did that. John Donahue,
Yeah.
who was former Nike executive, that he's kind of overhauling things a little bit there. He is absolutely from the revenue generation side without a background directly in college athletics. Yeah, absolutely. We will see that in certain places.
Yep.
What else we got? You got a game or two for this weekend you're looking forward to?
Well, where's your mind? Where's your mind as the weekend? I mean, for me, College Game Day is coming to Eugene for the second time. I mean,
Yep.
It's Oregon USC. It's a 12:30 kickoff. And oh, by the way, I got complaints. People are saying, what's with all the 12:30s? Can we get a night kickoff? And I'm like, what are we doing here? We complain. God forbid the kids get to bed at 9 p.m. On a Saturday night. But Oregon USC, big one. I think Oregon's going to knock the socks off USC. I just don't think USC's built for this game. And Oregon, Dan Lanning's vein in his neck will be going. I think Oregon will be fine at home against USC. That one's on my mind. What are you thinking about?
Well, I'm very curious about that game because I'm not convinced that a USC victory is going to get the Trojans in the playoff.
Ooh.
Yeah. But I do think an Oregon loss is going to be big trouble for the Ducks. The way things broke last weekend, especially with Oklahoma's win over Alabama, it's getting pretty crowded down in those, say, 8, 9, 10 spots for the CFP, right? I mean, 11 and 12 are going to be probably the ACC champ and the Group of 5 representative. So the last at-larges, 8, 9, 10. Oregon loses, they could be in trouble because they could have a situation where they finish the season without any wins over ranked teams because Iowa's now got 4 losses. So, and Washington's not ranked now. So, if the Ducks lose to USC, beat Washington, they're 10-2, probably no wins over ranked teams. They could be in trouble. So there's a lot at stake. It's kind of cool that there's a lot at stake for USC, Oregon, right? And the Trojans just haven't been to Eugene very much. I was looking, I think this is their 4th trip in the last 14 years, just because the Pac-12 divisions, they didn't get up there much. So it's great. Anytime these teams play, it's awesome.
Yeah, I like that. I just don't think it matches up well for USC. And Oregon playing for something, I think they'll be locked in. I'm also left looking at the SEC. I think we're going to get a bunch of pandering and propaganda about how a 3-loss team in the SEC could be deserving. I think a nightmare scenario, you're talking about the bottom of those rankings, would be Texas beating Texas A&M. And now you've got Texas going, hey, wait a minute, we've got a win over A&M.
Yeah,
and we've got a win over Vanderbilt, and but never mind, you lost to Florida. Never mind that you got 3 losses. I think too. There's
that's not a nightmare scenario for a nightmare scenario for ESPN.
Yes, and I'm watching Utah as well. Utah can't afford to trip. They've got to win. They've got a couple games here, and they've got to win. And Kyle Whittingham gets in there. I think we all kind of expect that would close the loop for him potentially on his career. So keep an eye on Utah as well.
Utah, chance to get the playoff and win the Big 12. BYU, playoff, Big 12. ASU still has a path to win the Big 12 and get back in the playoff. I mean, they need help. But even without Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson, ASU is still in the hunt. So a lot. It's Big 12. It's on brand, right? Total mayhem. The Big 10 is much more orderly. Ohio State, Indiana, basically locks for the playoff. USC, Oregon, trying to get that a large spot or two. So it should be a terrific weekend.
Do you have a question from last week's episode, Wilner? Before we go,
I do.
We can focus on maybe a viewer or a listener who put a question in the comments.
Yes, absolutely. Somebody asked when I'm going to get out of my parents' basement here with this background.
I love it.
And I will explain real quick. This is my son's room. And the reason is this is the room in the house that has the best connectivity because we have a redwood in our backyard. And so that has a way of making the connectivity issue a little bit difficult in the other places. So I kind of get comfy here in my son's room. But
does he charge you a fee to be
No, he likes it because I have to clean it. I have to clean it up.
Yeah.
So
love it.
All right. So here's one question. I thought it's a good one. Elaborating on what we talked about last week with Washington. And this was kind of my point with Rick Neuheisel. Why do I feel Washington isn't maybe on the same level as USC and Oregon when it comes to the commitment of resources and kind of the all-in alignment to win in football. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, part of it is, the perception matters. The perception is real. And so I do see the numbers in the bottom line, and that there's significant dollars that are being, funneled into football and but there is a perception about the University of Washington that is, gosh, they played at the top of the old Pac-12, but they are just not on par with the new Pac-12 schools. And then even when Washington made the move, there was the question. Remember, when Oregon and Washington were making that decision, there was the question of, could Washington afford it?
Yeah,
that came out there. You don't have Phil Knight, and that's the difference. Ultimately, you've got a better media market in Seattle than Eugene. You've got real proof of performance in the Don James era and the Huskies and Chris Peterson, and real proof of performance. It's real, and even Kalen DeBoer. But the perception that Washington's not on par with Oregon is valid. I don't think anybody outside of the Pacific Northwest is going, oh, these two things are the same. It's not quite as the disparity between USC and UCLA. That's dramatic, but there's a disparity there.
Yeah, there is. And when I think of the two at just the broadest level, I think to myself, based on watching them closely for, years, Oregon will spare no expense on any front to try to win a championship. I don't feel that necessarily as much with Washington. I do think Washington wants to win, but with the Washington administration that we've seen over the last 10, 15 years, spare every expense to do whatever it takes, I don't know that they would. Now we'll see. We'll see what happens moving forward here. New president, relatively new athletic director. But I want to see it. I want to see that all in, whatever it takes attitude that we have seen from the Ducks for 20 years now.
Yeah. And I think, it keeps coming up with these coaching hires. People talk about coordinators who have no proof of head coaching performance that have been plugged into some jobs and had success. Dan Lanning, success at Oregon. Yeah. And Kirby Smart at Georgia. But when you think, like Newhustle brought it up, you think about those places, they're built to win. Like they're built to compete. And I think you could have put, you put Mario Cristobal at Oregon, he wins. You put Willie Taggart at Oregon, he mostly wins. I think he would have been a 9 or 10 game winner in his, second or third year. But there's a plug and play feel at Oregon that I think you could put a lot of coaches into, and they would have great success. And Dan Lanning knows it. And I think that's why he's going to stay there a long time. I don't quite have that feel at Washington. I feel like the baseline at Washington is kind of 8 wins, maybe 9, and then in a special year more than that. And I think, we'll get a pretty good indicator here if Jed Fish has some offers.
Yes.
Kalen DeBoer left for Alabama, right? There's no shame in leaving for Alabama. But if Jed Fish leaves for UCLA or Florida, you're going to get an idea of where Washington is in that structure.
Yep. Oregon, everything Oregon had done was to prepare for this era of college football. And I'm not sure that's necessarily the case with Washington. Interestingly enough, we could continue this discussion with our guest next week. Yeah. Who will be joining us early next week to discuss a certain game on November 29th in Husky Stadium.
Okay. I like this. A little tease. There it is.
There we
All right.
go.
Throw us a question in the comment section if you have one. We'll get to it next week and beyond. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and so you don't miss a thing.
Thanks, everybody.